inside a mountain in Taiwan, held secure against the turbulence of history and the ravages of time. Only a handful of people may enter, and never alone. For here, hidden away from public gaze, in these rows of anonymous boxes, lies a treasure. More than 650,000 pieces, each one priceless, each one irreplaceable. It's possibly the world's greatest collection of ancient Chinese art. The National Palace Museum in Taiwan, one of the world's top museums. For several decades, it has preserved the fruits of centuries of collecting by China's emperors.
I think the greatest value of the National Palace Museum is because our collection is very, very special. It is one of a kind and truly precious. Of course, the collection is mainly drawn from Chinese culture and civilization. But in this way, in world culture, it is the best of its kind and a very important collection.
Among the collection's masterpieces, the jadeite cabbage, a small but intricately carved piece that embraces the flaws of a single piece of stone rather than denying them. The jadeite was painstakingly ground into complex shapes, including miniature insects on the leaf structure. A newly renovated National Palace Museum is infusing these artifacts with a new life, a new focus, just as the person who assembled the collection 270 years ago and set in motion the last golden age of the Chinese dynasties. The Emperor Qianlong was a renowned warrior. In the 60 years of his reign, he would establish China's greatest empire, ruling more than 300 million people. But above all, he loved art. When he became the 6th emperor of China's Qing dynasty in 1735, he became owner of a magnificent collection of treasures, handed down since the Song dynasty over 1,000 years ago. The imperial collection Qianlong inherited consisted of many thousands of artworks from the entire length of Chinese history. From Neolithic jade carvings to paintings and calligraphy by China's most famous artists. From antique bronzeware to some of the rarest ceramic pieces in existence. It was all his, but he wanted more. Qianlong believed that his legacy would be to preserve China's cultural treasure. His most significant commission, a catalog of all the important works on Chinese culture. It consisted of 36,000 volumes, handwritten by as many as 3,000 copyists. And it took 16 years to complete. His catalog of the art itself was just as extensive, attempting to record everything in the collection. But Qianlong saw himself as more than just a creator of lists. He was a collector himself, with a keen eye. Some of the finest pieces to be found here were ones he himself acquired. He had innovative ideas and broke away from the long tradition of idealized perfection. The emperor's devotion to the arts took up most of his spare time. He loved nothing more than to spend time among the artists himself. This was society fit for an emperor. Of course, respect was paid to the Son of Heaven, but here he saw himself as first among equals. He would work together with the finest artists and calligraphers, learning, improving, and creating. In his lifetime, he was to write some 40,000 poems and would paint whenever state business permitted. It was all part of his understanding of what Chinese art and the treasure he had inherited meant.
I think most of his predecessors, especially his father and his grandfather, none of them had taken up the collection in such a serious, personal way, because none of them has written as many poems or essays or produced so many catalogs as the way he did. He was really very, very unique and special.
Several thousand years of art collected over the centuries, its value respected and enhanced by Qianlong. Housed in a purpose-built museum designed to display these priceless artifacts to full advantage. To this day, it remains one of the world's greatest collections of any kind of art. The museum prides itself on keeping Qianlong's collection intact and see themselves as protectors of these treasures. Today, a new exhibition is being set up to honor the Qing dynasty. It's a sampling of the finest pieces from the collection, especially those pieces created for Emperor Qianlong. And some show the playful side of his character. This curio box contains a miniature art collection of its own. The pieces that he himself bought are treated with absolute reverence. He is almost the patron saint of this museum. After all, it was he who first cataloged the collection and who seriously added to it. He was the first curator.
Antiquities cannot speak. The ones who must give them a voice are museum curators. So when we want to deal with artifacts, the most important thing to remember is that this is an object made by a person. Behind the person who made this object are all the generations of people, the environment in which they lived, and its cultural trappings. So those of us who deal with artifacts are trying to recreate the environment and background from which these objects came.
But how did this treasure come to be here? How has it survived intact, given its extreme fragility? That story begins when the last emperor left the Forbidden City in Beijing in 1924. What was left of the imperial treasure became the property of the state. It went on public display for the first time in 1925 at the newly named Palace Museum. But within 6 years, it was to be threatened with destruction.